Brian. Good morning. Good to see you. Good to be with you all again and spend some time with you this morning. And we do come from the broader Portland area. Please don't think ill of us on account of that. We're not all like those people that you see in the news. We don't all have face tattoos, and some of us have wonderful relationships with our parents. And really the thing about Portland is you step just outside the city limits and it really looks a lot more like a red state. I grew up in a very, very conservative town in rural Oregon, and this feels a little bit like coming home. I know you may not claim me as a red state person, but that's what rural Oregon actually feels like. It's Portland. Really, that is just a unique place, and kind of everyone else in Oregon feels like this continually. Like, what are they doing there? But we've enjoyed being here very much, climbing in some of your caves and getting lost down there, and driving through your beautiful rolling hills. It's such a lovely place, and we're very happy to be here. So Brian asked, can you teach us something about family, children? I was before and during. I've been a pastor. I was a teacher for 20 years, and this is actually the very first year I'm not teaching. But then I got a job part-time doing some substitute teaching, so I'm still teaching. I've been involved in Christian education for the last 20 years. When we moved up to Portland, I took a position as a Latin and Bible teacher in a Christian school. And for the Bible class, they said, we want you to do Proverbs. And I have come to love the book, and I'm going to share something this morning from that study in Proverbs that I did. It's something that was very helpful to me, not only in working with my own children, but also in pastoring, also in very, very much in my own life and walk with God. Proverbs is one of those books that when pastors preach through it, you often kind of scratch your head and wonder, like, how are you going to do that? What are you going to do? When teachers determine to teach through Proverbs, it's often it's a struggle. One of the reasons for that, I believe, is that we don't think enough about Proverbs. We don't spend enough time with it to actually listen to it for what it is. Proverbs itself, if you look at the various places, not just in Proverbs, there's a handful of verses at the beginning, handful of verses at the end of Proverbs. Ecclesiastes says something about Proverbs. When you put those things all together, you realize that the book of Proverbs actually tells you very much what you're supposed to do with it. First of all, it calls book of Proverbs sayings. They are supposed to be wise sayings. I'm sure you have in your culture here, I'm certain of it. You can recognize a wise person because it will often have aphorisms and wise sayings that just kind of come out of them, helpful ways of kind of summing up a body of ethical understanding. That's what Proverbs is supposed to be. In Ecclesiastes, Proverbs are called goads. They are meant to be these ethical prods that as you're going along, you see a situation or you encounter a temptation, you feel this this little poke in the back, like, oh, we're not supposed to do that. Oh, we're not that. And these little ethical understandings come to mind, and they help you to guide you on the path of wisdom. Proverbs are collected. Solomon was famously collected them, but he's not the only one. The wise people of Israel gathered them and accumulated them. They're meant to be. So we learn from Proverbs what we're supposed to do with it. Proverbs are also, by their very structure, meant to be meditations. By their very structure. What do I mean by that? Well, Hebrew poetry, as you know, is parallel. It always sets itself up, most often with two lines of text, and they don't always repeat what is up here. That's intentional. It is meant to be, it doesn't rhyme. It doesn't have meter to it. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to set some kind of a statement here and then set another statement here, and you are meant to kind of read these two things or think on these two things or say these two things and reflect on what is going on there. Well, that's what we're going to do today, and we're going to look at one proverb, and and we're going to fill up our time. It's in chapter 13, and this proverb in particular is something which I think we need to hear today in 2025 in our day and age with the particular temptations that we are tempted with as God's covenant people. This is Proverbs 13, verse 20. And I'm going to argue that this teaches us something of the social dynamics of becoming wise. There is a social dynamic of becoming wise. Wisdom is not something that we simply gain by sitting alone in a room of books and reading. And that is one way to gain some wisdom, but that's not the vision of wisdom getting in Proverbs. At least it's not exclusively that. I would even argue it's not even essentially that. It's not primarily that. Wisdom is primarily a social function. It's something you get from being around a community of wise people and intentionally, or sometimes unintentionally, just simply gathering the wisdom that from being around wise people. So let's start by just reading the text. Proverbs 13:20. It says this: "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." So what I want to do is just simply, I want to take this proverb and probably nearly to the point of exasperation with you, I want to look at it from all kind of different perspectives, think about it, chew on it, and then make some application in regard to how we raise our children, how we think about them, how we think about our own lives and the temptations of 2025 and what we've been tempted with. Okay? So, Proverbs, as I said, these are always set to us in parallel form. Our English proverbs typically are just kind of a pithy statement that's usually kind of put in a catchy way. Often there will be little rhetorical flourishes of the words that sound nice together and things like that. It's not Proverbs. So we've got these two lines of Proverbs 13:20, and we need to ask what is going on here. Well, we see that these two lines have been chosen to go together here, not because there's basically three different. When you're writing a proverb, a Hebrew proverb, you got three options basically for 99% of them. You say the same thing, so A and something like A, or you amplify the first line, so you say A and then you say like mega A, okay? So you expand it, or you say the same truth but from a completely different perspective, A and B. And that's what we have here. They're really saying the same thing. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but then we're going to look at it from the other side, but the companion of fools suffers harm. So that's the first thing to note here. That it's simply saying it from the opposite perspective. So it's looking at it there from both sides. It's a very, very typical form. The other thing to note about Proverbs is, of course, we run into great danger when we turn these into absolute law of God. There are never any violations of this in our human experience, and of course that's not true. But there are degrees of that in Scripture. Some of the Proverbs really do function like absolutes. Okay? Like, let me give you an example. They're true all the time. They're really true all the time. The righteous hates falsehood. It's almost definitional. One of the elements of being the righteous is that you hate falsehood, but the wicked brings shame and disgrace. Well, in some manner or another, a wicked person, their life is going to bring shame and disgrace. Those are absolutely true all the time, 100%. You can't think of, well, I knew this really great wicked person. Or, I knew this righteous person, he liked to lie a whole lot. That's never going to be, you're not going to find exceptions to that. But sometimes, though, Proverbs state a good probability. So, as an example, Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle." Think of lottery winners and how frequently they end up not just poor, but destitute. And because it often ruins them. They often don't know how to handle so much wealth. It ruins. Well, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Now, this would be a good example, though, of a proverb of which, if you sit and think or you Google it, you can find exceptions. You can find exceptions. There are people who have gained it by inheritance or gained by some stroke of, just good providence. They found oil, they struck oil, and then it led to maybe generational wealth. It maybe led to wealth for their whole life. But very often that's not true. Very often that's not true. So that would be more on the other side of the spectrum of something that's not always true all the time, but it's true enough. It's true enough, and it's frequent enough that the proverb works. The proverb works. And even in those cases where you can think of exceptions, it's one of those things that's good to pull out and say, it's good to be reminded of this, because this is often true, right? So we don't dismiss it in those cases. We remember it as a kind of a warning. This is something that frequently happens. So where is our proverb? Let's think about this in terms of, is this something absolutely true 100% of the time? It's definitional. It's the law of God. It's something, or is this something, it's generally true. It's generally true by experience. So let's look at it again. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Well, that's going to obviously be something more towards the side of the absolute, I think, but not always true. It's probably more towards that side. It's definitely not something that, that's occasionally true. That's people who hang out and walk with fools. Can you think of very many exceptions where those people, they just develop great wisdom and they become, I don't know if this water's for me. It is. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and drink it. I don't just drink people's cups of water without asking. Generally speaking, nearly always true that when people choose, especially at an early stage of life, I want to associate with wise people. I want to associate with just people, with prudent people. It's going to go well with them. They're going to become like those people. And people who, especially at an early age, say, I want to associate with fools. I enjoy their company. They make me laugh. They're fun to be. Well, we're not surprised. Generally speaking, this is definitely going to lean more towards, it's almost always true. This is almost always true. Okay? So that's another perspective of which to look at it. But like most proverbs, it's prudent to add this in our thinking as we read it. All things being equal, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. The companion of fools will suffer harm. All things being equal. Okay. So, I just noticed a couple of things about the actual words of this proverb itself. I told you I would nearly exasperate you with this kind of thing. We will make some application. I'll get to the point here in a second, but it's helpful to stop. Notice that it uses the metaphor of walking. It uses the metaphor of walking. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. And of course, it doesn't simply mean if you're on a trail. We walked for 4 miles yesterday. I don't really know. I heard some people talking around me and this and that. There was a group of people that were definitely not walking with the Lord. You know who I'm talking about, Brian. There's a couple of ladies there that were rather ostentatious in their immoral behavior. It was a little bit, that's what we see nowadays. We were walking with them. We found ourselves from time to time, I don't need to belabor the point. That's not what this is talking about. We didn't come out on the other side immoral and just like those people and like, get this off of it. That's not the point. Walking with is a metaphor for living in close proximity to, such that you become influenced by, such that you imitate the lifestyle of. This is what Scripture means when it says walking with. Walking with is a very important scriptural metaphor for not just the Christian life, but the whole method of salvation. God says in Genesis 2, came down to the garden to walk with, right? In Genesis 3, he came down to the garden to, well, not in Genesis 2. He did come down to the garden and set it up. But in Genesis 3, after the fall, God has come down. It says he came down in the cool of the day to walk in the garden. That is not because heaven became a very hot place and he's like, I got to get down to that garden and cool off a little bit. No, he came down there because that would be the time of day in which Adam and Eve would find it pleasant to walk. He came down there to spend time with them, to give them counsel, to have fellowship with them. But they were not to be found. They were hiding from him. So there is, by a negative example, you see when sin enters into the picture, we are driven away from walking with God. We hide from God. But this theme is picked back up again in the later chapters. In Genesis 5, Enoch walked with God, right? He did not live long on the earth, as far as we know here. It says all the days of Enoch were 365. And he walked with God, and this is given to us that we know that this story is typical. It's stamped there in Scripture for us to be a living example of what it means to walk with God. And he was not, for God took him. Walking with God leads to life. It leads to fellowship with God. This is one of the very, very few examples of Scripture of someone being taken up to be with God. That's what you want. So the righteous reading Genesis saying Adam and Eve hid from God. Enoch walked with God. Again, it says this again of Noah in chapter 6, in verse 9. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. That's what he was like. And what did that lead to? It led to him being sheltered and protected from the judgment that was coming on the earth. Tomorrow we're going to go see his boat. And I hear it's not the actual boat, but it's a model of that boat. But that's where walking with God leads you. He protects you. He cares for you. So walking with is this important metaphor. Well, Psalm 1, the front of the Psalter. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of. Walking, standing, sitting, you have this idea. Blessed is the man who does not do that with the wicked. But in contrast, and here's where we learn how you walk with God. But his delight is in the law of God, and on his law he meditates day and night. In friendship with God, he becomes fruitful. And he ends up with the righteous in judgment, standing on judgment day, and the wicked are scattered like chaff. So, coming back to Proverbs 13:20, whoever walks with the wise. So I just want you to see that. This isn't it's clearly not talking about just some sort of temporary, you find yourself on a bus, you make some pleasant conversation with this person, they're wise, and you're just like the streams of wisdom just start to. No, this is a person who has made a conscious commitment to associate with these people, to be with them, to listen to them, to hear them, to receive them. I think there is definitely included in this an idea of imitative, I want to be like these people, approval, and so forth. Okay? Well, the teaching that we have from this sounds very much like the Proverbs itself, because that's how Proverbs are. They sound like the teaching. But if I would summarize what this is getting at, the simple will absorb wisdom or folly from those they closely associate with. And what I mean here by simple is someone who's influenceable. Okay? Your children are simple. Simple, when children are simple, it's not a moral judgment of them, that's what they are. They are pliable. They are influenceable. When older people are still simple, that's looked down on in Proverbs is a problem. But children are meant to be understood that. So the Proverbs especially have an application in terms of children because they're still at the early courses. These are decisions yet to be made. Often as we become older, I'm 47, we look back through Proverbs and we tear up. We're like, I should have made better decisions. It's reflective and corrective in how we have lived our lives. But for our children, these are important things to remember. These are still choices before them. So I want to just simply develop this with you with just a few points of application and thought about what we would do with this, how it might influence our lives. The first thing is that from this, we would recognize how important it is, the psychological truth that we are imitative creatures by nature. It does not take great wisdom, okay, to become wise in this regard. You simply need to be around those people, and you will gather what they are. You will become like them by being around them. God has created us in some fashion that by simply being around people, how they talk, how they reason, their values, what they find funny, what they like, their manners, their customs, we will be like them. We will be like them. We simply absorb it. We can think of many examples of people that we know. I sit here and I wrote out like 6 or 7 of people, young people that I knew who were walking on the path of righteousness. They were Christians, baptized Christians. These were people that had very edifying conversations with at some point in their life. And yet, at some point, they made some choice to associate with people. They did not make a choice to abandon their faith. They did not make a choice to reject Christianity. Had you spoken with them at the point of those decisions, they would never have said, I'm choosing folly. I'm choosing folly. They wouldn't have said that. They wouldn't have said that. And yet it was this choice to associate that was so powerful because of the nature, because of human nature, of what we are. One young Christian, just simply where he chose to work, and he developed a close group of friends in this workplace, I know, and he quickly, within a matter of a year, kind of abandoned the faith. And it was a step-by-step process of watching him. Many people warning him, you're getting very, very close with this group of people that you work with. They became his close friends. He began to imitate them, and now he's not walking with the Lord anymore. I've seen young women that some of these who I know were very, very upstanding, had excellent reputation in the Christian community, marry men who were Christians, but were maybe a little more towards the left, a little more progressive, or maybe a little bit unwise in their behavior. And those men took their women with them. And that's a very interesting thing, how the very, very godly and I would have said very wise young people, but they made a choice to marry a person who, not necessarily, and I could just think of 4 examples. One, if you had asked me when I was 19, who is the wisest and godliest 21-year-old, I would have said the name of this girl. She had just an amazing reputation. She married a man who was a pastor at a very young age. I always wonder about that. But he was kind of a independent spirit. And now he has become a very, very progressive Christian and has accepted all sorts of heretical teachings and loose views on Scripture and so forth. And he has veered a long, long way from when I knew him 20 years ago. Well, so is she. A few steps behind him. My understanding was, of course, I didn't like call her up. You know, she was a good friend of mine growing up. I didn't call her up and try, like, what are you doing? You know, but from people that know them very well, they have said she's not been happy with everything that's happened. And of course, that's how it's going to happen, because some of these things have just simply, I don't like what we're doing. But she has now found herself by this covenant association, walking with her husband for these many years. She has found herself, she's not recognizable in terms of her beliefs, where she started 20 years ago. She's been a covenant companion with a fool, and it has really, really impacted her. I have two friends who immediately out of college, these were very, very good friends in terms of Christian companions. I would have considered them wiser than myself in many ways. But they decided they're going overseas. Don't do that. No, I'm just kidding. But they were going overseas to study theology, and they landed in these rather secular theology departments overseas. And, you know, they told me, like, you should come do it. It's much cheaper and faster to do it this way or something. You know, like, you can get big scholarships. They'll support, like, it's a much faster way to get, like, a PhD or something like that. And that's what they did. They ended up in these programs where they got really, really good scholarships. They were faster programs. They were academically rigorous. They enjoyed that element of it. But they basically studied theology under non-believers. And both of these men have veered far away. One is an atheist, and he's veered very, very, very smart. Probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my whole life. But not wise in terms of who he chose to associate with at a very early age, learn his theology from, and these people basically just dragged him down and ruined his faith. This other friend, the moment he got off the boat, one of the professors that was his advisor, one of his advisors, handed him Karl Barth. And I don't know if you know who Karl Barth is, but this is not something that a 20-year-old theology student should be reading. Maybe something that a 40, 50-year-old, there's probably some good observations that he made, but it basically it hurt him horribly, wounded his faith, and he has not recovered. He has been veering far to the left ever since. And these are people that they chose to associate with. They didn't see the danger in this. Had you asked them, you're going to end up in this place, they would have been, no, there's no way I'm going to end up in this place. No, I know my convictions. I know who I believe. I know what I believe about the Bible and Scripture. It was through friendships. It was through these associations, and they were pulled. And I have many examples here. I'm not going to go into all these. You probably can think of examples, but that's how this works. We are imitative creatures. We are not as rational as we think we are. We're not pure logical machines. Our minds just take in truth and we're not like that. We will find arguments and reasons and things to justify our slipping and sliding in different directions. And we will believe, these people believe that it has been reason and good idea and truth and that has led them where they have gone. They can give an account of it. Reasons, but it's been friendships. It's been people they admire. People they enjoy being around that have led them in that direction. That's very important for us to know about ourselves, Everybody needs to recognize we're not as rational as we think we are. We're imitative creatures. And I've seen this in myself. I've seen, my life has not, just a disclaimer here, my life has not been this perfect, you know, as the poet says, a crystal staircase going up. It has been a rickety up and down time. One of the particularly low points in my life was my teenage years through associations where walking in the Christian faith, but through, you know, I was a typical public school kid and in some ways influenced by people around me. In some ways not a great influence on the people around me, but in a particularly low point in my life, I was becoming very, very much like all the people around me. But there's this TV show that I watched, and I'm embarrassed to say this here, but it was Beavis and Butthead. I don't know if you're in your 40s, you might remember in the late 80s, early 90s, there was this horrible TV show called Beavis and Butthead. And it's just this fascinating piece of sociology. What was that thing, you know, and what became of that? One summer, I watched a lot of episodes of that. And I found myself, without even thinking about it, starting to talk like Beavis and Butthead. And someone called me out on it. And it was my mom. And I remember exactly where we were and driving. And she said, I notice you sound like this. And she was describing how I sound. And she was like, I just want to say, this is what I'm hearing. And it's a little strange. And I don't know where this is coming from. But you keep talking like this. And you keep saying this. And I just sat in the car and I realized how much, just one summer of listening to this TV show had influenced the whole way in which I talked. And I talked like an idiot. And I thought it was funny. I wasn't consciously trying to do it all the time. I would just, these things, well, this is what happens. You know, there was this epidemic of Tourette's that happened during the pandemic from young people who suddenly found themselves with hours and hours and hours more time in their rooms, especially where we live, on TikTok watching Tourette's videos. And people were showing up at the doctor's office with sudden onset of Tourette's. And by that just meaning tics, various tics of different kinds. Sometimes it was things that they just uncontrollably would say. Sometimes it was like mannerisms and things like that. I think this is still a problem in some areas, but a lot of this has kind of been corrected and whatever. But one doctor in particular noticed a trend of people that were coming to her and seeing this, and she started to search online, like, why is this happening? And she saw somewhere on there that there was a sudden interest on TikTok of Tourette's videos. People were making their Tourette's story. And she started to watch it. She realized this is something that is spreading among millions of young people, not a biological reason at all for what was happening within them, in their minds, but they were developing these tics. It was simply by imitating what they were seeing. They weren't trying, I'm going to try this one now, and just by watching it, their brains were being shaped. She began to develop tics. She began to develop verbal and physical tics by just studying this so she could help people. And it scared her to death. And never forget that illustration. But it was a very, very useful illustration of how imitative we are in how God has made us. He made us to imitate the things that are around us. So I want to just end here. I realize we're going to run out of time. Is that right, Brian? About 10 more minutes? Is that okay? How, when we think about ourselves, but when we think about our children and how we're raising them, we need to not only think of the education we choose for them, that's one of those important influences, the things that we say to them, our discipline philosophy. Think of all the different types of things that young parents are thinking of, like, okay, what are the different things we need to think about in terms of our children and how we're going to raise them. We want to raise them up in the covenant, in the Lord, taking them to church. We're going to be this kind of church people. We're going to show up to Sunday school, we're going to go to these meetings, these prayer meetings. We're going to do these kinds of things. One of the things, obviously, that we need to think about is how are we going to help shape them in terms of the friends that they make, And that seems like an obvious application of this. I hope that should be obvious. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. We have perhaps more control over this as they're younger. Basically, you pick the friend. You put these kids in front of other people. You say, "These are your friends." No, oh, yeah. You're playing with him today. Oh, okay. And kids are normally very, very happy with it. As they become teenagers, it becomes more of a, hey, can we talk about this person that you're hanging out with, or can we talk about that? But I want you to think about how it is that we sometimes don't recognize influences on our children as this type of companion. Okay? And what I mean is their social media accounts. We don't recognize those kinds of things. We think of them in terms of entertainment. And in some ways, what is happening with kids is they go to school and they sit there like this, and some of it gets into them and some of it doesn't. Depends on their attention and interest, largely. Sometimes their sense of duty, just like, I don't know, I've had kids as a teacher over the years, I've had kids say to me, I have no interest in this topic at all, but show me what I need to do to get an A on the test. Basically some kind of a contractual arrangement. We're talking about mitochondria today. Absolutely not interested in this at all. But I am interested in getting an A for whatever reason on that, so they might pay attention to that. You get more learning when they are interested in the things that they're talking about. But generally, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, as you go to school, and some kids are interested in Jane Austen, and some are not at all, and some are interested in history, and some are not at all. And I'll tell you what happens, though, with all of them, or a large part of them. They go home and they spend, on average, several hours. In fact, the average amount of time kids spend online now is 6 hours. And I think there's not even enough time in the day. How in the world is this happening? Well, it happens because they're compounding their media intake with other activities that they're doing throughout the day. So they might be doing their homework, but they have YouTube on right here. Or they might be, as is sometimes the case, sitting at the dinner table and they have social media going over. Their interaction with screens, on average, I know that's not true generally in the church, especially among more covenantally faithful churches, but the average American household, a youth, spends about 6 hours of time in front of a screen. And that's a lot of influence. A lot of that time is engagement and interest at a very, very high level. Why? Because they're picking what they're looking at. And they generally are not picking things that this is just good for you, this is important. I need to watch these videos because, well, I'm not really interested in it, but I think it's important for me. That's not what happens. And the recommendation engine isn't, these aren't like Puritans sitting back there. This would be a very, very important thing for this young person to think about and meditate on for the next hour. That's not what's happening. The engagement engines that are at work there are selecting things that will just simply hold their attention. So it tends to lean towards the outrageous and the irate, the things that just simply get you stirred up, towards the silly, towards the outrageous, And what I mean is this hit home a few years ago. My daughter's not here, I can pick on her. And I'm going to pick, this was a bit of bad parenting on my part. We have all been trying to figure out, I know we've all lived through the digital revolution, and at each stage there have been points in time where we look at what the interaction with our own ourselves, our kids, our phones, their phones, if they have phones, the TV, computer, all these, we've had to all sort this out. We've been doing this for 20 plus years. How does this work? Well, there was a point in time where our daughter had a phone, but it had all these protections against immorality and against certain apps we don't want her to use and things like that. It had time limits. It had a number of things. But one of the things I noticed in my daughter was that there was a lot of silliness. A lot of silliness from her behavior. And it got me thinking, where is this coming from? We're kind of a jovial family. I don't know. We joke around a lot, but that was not where it was coming from. School, this is a school of very, very serious people. And that was not where it was coming from. Well, you look at her YouTube videos, again, not immoral, not violent. She wasn't looking at like all these kind of like anorexia. There's crazy stuff on there. It wasn't that. It was just people. They were like cooking videos and stuff like that. But they were silly. So the people would just continually, because that's how they farm for engagement. It's not enough to just like, well, today we're going to make a pie, and this is what we're going to do. It's not. No, we're going to make a pie, and then we're going to smash each other's faces with it, and it's like these people have learned. The people that make these videos, they've learned that by doing that, they get more views. So they've been trained to be silly, to be outrageous, to be ridiculous. The algorithm rewards that, right? So that was showing up in her behavior because she's an imitative person. And we were noticing that. We're like, what is happening here? Well, again, that's not, maybe the worst of things. That's a simple anecdote. But of course, I just want to ask you this, and this is really the big take-home question here. Would you invite those people to come in your house and put on a cooking thing? Teach us how to make a pie, and then smash our faces with the pie, Or run out in public and do some kind of exhibitionist-like thing where we're going to take these and we're going to have people eat pie, but it's really going to be made out of, like, disgusting. Like, you wouldn't invite people into your life to do that. That's what we need to. We need to make the connection here. It's not just harmless entertainment. These are people that you are inviting into your world, and you're saying, we want to spend a good amount of time with you, and we're going to become more like you. They're not going to be more like us, but we're going to become more like you at the end of that. Most of us don't think about our social media in that regard, okay? So that's one way in which I think this proverb, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, the companion of fools will suffer harm. We've done I think, as a church broadly, we've done a really mixed job. We get a C in terms of how we've handled immorality. It is difficult. It is a challenge of our day and age. The filters don't always work. This doesn't always work. It shows up, and however, I think we get a D- in terms of thinking about not just, but the influences. So that's just silliness, but it can also happen in that we have young people that are being radicalized. Their faith is being assaulted, and what are they doing? Oh, they're just in YouTube. We just assume they're watching some kind of like sports videos or something like that. And really, they're on Discord listening to some communist who's playing a video game, but he's like spouting all this evil, false teaching to children. We've all heard stories. Again, this is probably a little more rare, but it still happens. Stories of children that went to a Christian school, were raised in a pastor's household, or like the deacon's children. Christian school, Christian friends, Christian this, Christian that. They shopped at a Christian sportswear store, something like that, right? Like everything. You look back at the detectives as they show up these things. How did this happen? And they ended up like radicalized, just radicalized, far to the right or far to the left. How did that happen? Well, they were spending a couple of hours every night. We were assuming watching basketball games, watching highlights, or playing video games. But they were spending that time being radicalized by these. You would never have invited these people, communists. Come in and spend time with my kids. Show them your ways. We would never do that. So we don't know that that's happening. We need to be aware of the things that are influencing our children. We ourselves can fall prey to this, of course. Again, cast this mostly in terms of how we raise our children. You all have the experience of going on Facebook or Twitter or any of these, Instagram, and putting it down and feeling angry. disgusted, mad. You know, the influence is us as well. Well, how much more our simple children? No offense, children, but how much more our simple children? And as parents, we need to realize the shaping influence that is right there all around us. I think I've used up all the time. I'll give it opportunity for comments or questions that you might have. Okay. Yeah, Brian. Yeah.
How do we, like maybe you could think of an analogy with alcohol, right? You would want to kind of train your children to maybe responsibly use that
Absolutely.
product,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can we, responsibly train a young person to, because their work eventually may require them to have it.
You're right. Yeah.
So any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah. Well, you're definitely right. And I think it is prudent to expose kids to technology, for sure. I think the only that what so let me say the thing that came to my mind as you were saying that is the idea that we can stay ahead of this thing is a fool's game. You cannot stay ahead of it. The moment, has this not been all of your experience? The moment you feel like, I've got a really good setup, my children they have some technology, but we feel like we have it kind of under control here. And the technology over here. And then there's a new app, a new interface, some kind of, like it just keeps changing. The tech wisdom of 2015 is not the same as the tech wisdom of 2020. As the tech wisdom of 2000. The wisdom is the same, but the actual practical, what do you do, is very different because it just keeps changing. And I think that the parental controls are far, far better than they were in 2010. There is a lot more that you can do, but at the same time, we have screens everywhere in our society. Schools, I think foolishly, just inundated kids with screens. They're surrounded by it. So how do you account for all those things? So you need to really respect your enemy. And be very, very careful. I think Neil Postman is the guy that we need to do a lot more reading of, who was very suspicious of where he died before it all unfolded. The internet was just barely taking off. And his book, Technopoly, his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, if you haven't read those, they're very, very helpful reading. But his thing is a new technology always brings with it dangers. And they never advertise that. Smartphone did not start by saying, this is going to consume 6 hours. It would never. Steve Jobs, the original, you go back and look at his original first stump speech for I don't remember what you call it, but promo of it. It was just simply a phone that combined 3 already existing technologies. It's going to make your whole life more efficient. It has not produced that. There are some elements that are more efficient. It's also produced countless hours wasted, and it just wasn't a part of the original vision, and he didn't have that vision. So approach everything with a great amount of suspicion, absolutely. And I just think that generally you need to be some years behind the curve, not early adopter. So where, it would be very, very wise to adopt things that have been more tested. And, these days there are some really great dumb phones that kids can use. Yeah. Oh, here's a good example. For a while, we had a video game system in our house that was just not state of the art and certainly not connected to the internet. That's a whole other area. Video game systems are now connected. Everything's connected. Your glasses are going to be connected. But just like, and it was such that the kids, weren't so enamored with, they might go and play with it for a little while, but it's like, this isn't an infinity of entertainment. It's not like that. So we still have a DVD player in our house, which is kind of one of the ways you add friction to it. You add enough friction that it's not this infinity of distraction. So you got to think of it in terms of helpful friction. I don't know. It's a struggle. Yeah. So, sir.
When I was raising my children, my TV always broke on us. It seemed that when I wanted to watch sports, it was working okay.
I knew you were going to say that. Something's wrong with this thing.
But I really enjoyed Robert's book on bridges.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
give it out. I think it's excellent. I had a man that tutoring and he said that his sons, he taught his sons really to know the Lord up to this age, but he said he's now almost 17 years old. He said, I am hopeless what to do, so I gave him one of those books.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, get him into the Word of God in Proverbs.
That's right.
Proverbs is the book.
It is the book. Yes.
Teach our children.
Charles Bridges, Banner of Truth Commentary on Proverbs. Fantastic book. Yes. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity.